There is a plant growing in your backyard right now that contains more protein than quinoa, more iron than spinach, and more vitamin C than oranges. Indigenous tribes across 4 continents called it the life giver. They planted it in their most sacred gardens. They ground its seeds into bread that sustained entire communities through brutal winters. They knew its leaves could heal wounds faster than anything in their medicine bundles. For over 8,000 years, this plant fed more humans than wheat and corn combined. Then in 1947, something changed. The same agricultural departments that had recommended it for victory gardens during World War II suddenly classified it as one of the world's most problematic weeds. Today, Monsanto sells herbicides specifically engineered to kill it. Universities publish eradication guides. Farmers spray millions of acres to destroy what their great-grandparents cultivated as food. They convinced you it was worthless. But they lied. This plant still grows in every climate on Earth, still produces more nutrition per square foot than anything in your grocery store, and still remembers how to save lives. The question is, why did they want you to forget? Welcome to Lost Plant Remedies. Before we uncover this buried truth, if this knowledge matters to you, the best way to preserve it is simple. Subscribe, hit the bell, and share these lost remedies with those who need to remember what we forgot. The story begins along the Mississippi River in 700 AD. Archaeologists excavating Cahokia, the largest pre-Columbian settlement north of Mexico, made a discovery that rewrote everything we thought we knew about Native American agriculture. In storage pits beneath the ancient city, they found thousands of charred seeds. Not corn, not beans, not squash. Seeds from a plant they had dismissed as a common weed. Carbon dating revealed these seeds had been deliberately stored, processed, and cultivated for over 1,300 years. The Cahokians had been growing this plant in massive quantities, grinding the seeds into flour and using it as their primary grain crop centuries before corn arrived from Mexico. The Lakota called it Wape Makoskan, the bear's spinach. The Cherokee knew it as Tsaladihi. The Hopi called it Como, sacred food. The Haudenosaunee revered it as one of the 3 sisters' companions. Across the Great Plains, the Southwest, the Eastern Woodlands, over 200 tribes had the same plant in their gardens. Not by accident, by design. This is lamb's quarters, botanically known as Chenopodium album, the same family that gave us quinoa, and this species has been feeding humans longer than any other cultivated plant, except maybe wild rice. When Lewis and Clark crossed the continent in 1805, they recorded that native women gathered lamb's quarters seeds by the thousands of pounds each autumn. They would beat the mature seed heads into baskets, winnow them like wheat, and store them in underground caches that could feed a village through winter. The seeds were ground into flour and mixed with cornmeal. The leaves were eaten fresh in summer, dried for winter, or cooked into stews. But here is what the explorers did not understand. This was not supplemental food. In many regions, lamb's quarters was the foundation crop, more reliable than corn in drought and more nutritious than anything else they could grow. By the 1800s, European settlers had discovered what Native Americans had known for millennia. Lamb's quarters saved lives. During the Irish potato famine of 1845, families survived by gathering wild lamb's quarters when everything else failed. In Ukraine, during the Holodomor of 1932, villagers called it lebeda, the lifesaver. Swedish peasants knew it as mala, a backup crop when grain harvests failed. World War II changed everything. Victory garden manuals published by the US Department of Agriculture recommended lamb's quarters as an essential crop. The 1943 edition called it superior to spinach in every nutritional category. Government pamphlets taught families how to cultivate it, harvest it, and preserve it. Rationing made wild foods patriotic. Then the war ended. Chemical companies that had been manufacturing explosives needed new markets. Agricultural chemicals became the answer. DDT, 2,4-D, herbicides that could kill anything green. But they had a problem. How do you sell poison to farmers who had been growing food without chemicals for 8,000 years? You convince them their traditional crops are worthless. The same plant the government had promoted in 1943 became classified as a serious agricultural weed by 1950. The same universities that had published cultivation guides began publishing eradication manuals. Dr. Laura Merrick at the University of Vermont analysed lamb's quarters in 1998. The results were staggering. Per 100 grams, lamb's quarters contains 4 times more vitamin C than oranges, 6 times more vitamin A than spinach, more protein than quinoa, more calcium than milk, and more iron than beef. The amino acid profile is complete, containing all 9 essential amino acids humans cannot produce. The omega-3 fatty acid content rivals flax seeds. It contains beta-cyanins, the same antioxidants that make beets red, and betalains that may prevent cancer. But here is the impossible part. Lamb's quarters produces these nutrition levels without fertilizer, without pesticides, without irrigation. It thrives in poor soil where other crops starve. It survives drought that kills corn. It produces 30,000 seeds per plant, each viable for decades. One study in Nebraska measured yields of wild lamb's quarters at over 2 tons per acre, without planting, without cultivation. Just wild plants growing in abandoned fields. Compare that to spinach, which averages 1.5 tons per acre with intensive management. So why isn't lamb's quarters in every grocery store? Why don't farmers cultivate it commercially? Why do agricultural departments still classify it as a weed? Because you cannot patent 8,000 years of indigenous knowledge. You cannot create hybrid varieties that farmers must purchase annually. You cannot sell fertilizer for a crop that grows in poor soil. You cannot sell herbicides for a plant that outcompetes other weeds naturally. The entire economic model of industrial agriculture depends on crops that require constant inputs: seeds, chemicals, equipment, expertise. Lamb's quarters requires none of that. Plant it once, and it reseeds itself forever. By 1970, chemical companies had convinced farmers that any plant growing without permission was a weed by definition. Lamb's quarters, amaranth, purslane, plantain, all the plants that had sustained human civilization for millennia suddenly became enemies, requiring chemical warfare. The herbicide industry now generates $40 billion annually. Much of that profit comes from killing plants that are more nutritious than anything we cultivate commercially. But knowledge does not die, it just goes underground. In Mexico, quintonil, the local name for lamb's quarters, still appears in traditional markets. Families saute the leaves with garlic and chile. In Greece, they call it vlita and serve it with olive oil and lemon. In China, it is hui kai, boiled and seasoned. Indigenous communities across North America never stopped knowing. They kept gathering seeds, kept cooking leaves, kept passing knowledge to their children despite centuries of suppression. Now climate change is forcing a reckoning. Drought is killing wheat crops across the Great Plains. Heat is destroying corn in the Midwest. Farmers are facing the same conditions that made lamb's quarters essential for 8,000 years. Research stations in Africa are studying chenopodiums for food security. The plant produces food in conditions where other crops fail completely. Semi-arid regions, salty soils, places where climate change is hitting first, but in America, we still spray it with poison. Learn to identify lamb's quarters. The leaves are diamond-shaped, with white powder underneath when young. The stems are often streaked with red or purple. The seed heads form dense clusters at the top of the plant in late summer. Harvest the young leaves any time from spring through fall. They taste like spinach but milder and slightly nutty. Sauté them, add them to soups, or eat them raw in salads. The seeds are ready when they turn from green to black and fall easily from the stem. Collect them by beating the seed heads into a bucket, winnow them like grain, grind them into flour, or cook them like quinoa. One plant in your garden can produce enough seeds to feed your family for months, and enough leaves to replace every bag of spinach you buy. Stop poisoning abundance. Start remembering what indigenous peoples never forgot. The life giver is still here, still growing, still offering the same nutrition that sustained civilizations. They called it a weed because they could not control it, but that is exactly why we need it now. If this hidden gem revealed something important to you, subscribe to Lost Plant Remedies and hit the bell. Every like and share helps preserve what they tried to erase. The next lost remedy will be uncovered soon.